It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this is one of our special shows that we do for the members only section at OppermanReport.com. So, what I'm going to try and do is tell you about the Art Bell feud and lawsuit that took place in the late 90s. Whew, if you lived through this thing, man, it was a fascinating time. It was a fascinating story. Now, it culminated in a lawsuit. Art Bell sued David John Oates and Robert A.M. Stevens, and then ultimately also sued Ted Gunderson for defamation. It was a $60 million lawsuit. Okay. Now, let's go through these cast of characters. Everybody knows who Ted Gunderson is, the former FBI agent in charge of the L.A. division, and later on became a private investigator involved with the was that McDonald case? Yeah, Jeff McDonald, and then satanic ritual abuse case and the McMartin case and all that kind of stuff. Everybody knows that. David John Oates was this bizarre character from Australia with this thick Australian accent, and he used to be a frequent guest on Art Bell all the time. And what his claim to fame is that he invented reverse speech. And that is, if you took a recording, let's say you took a recording of what I'm saying right now, which you probably will when he gets all of this recording, and then he'll play it backwards, and then he hears secret messages in there. He hears secret things people are saying. That's like a lie detector test. You can hear what they're really thinking by playing it backwards. But one of the problems is only he can hear it. Okay? And he has to teach you how to hear it. So he gives lessons and classes and all that kind of stuff. But he was a frequent guest on Art Bell, and he used to go on there all the time. Now, what happened? And then Robert A.M. Stevens was this bizarre character, con man, flim-flam artist, grifter, the whole deal, who at the time of all this was living up in Missoula, Montana, on a ranch with this guy named TJ, and TJ's 15-year-old daughter. Okay, maybe we'll get to that too. What a fascinating story this is. Oh my God. Now what happened was this, okay? David Oates had a lot of fans from the Art Bell show and from his website, his reverse speech classes and all the kind of stuff he was doing. I think he sold special little tape recorders that could play things backwards. I mean, when you were on Art Bell, you make a lot of money, because back in those days, Art Bell would have like 15 million listeners on AM radio all across the country. And it was just at the beginning of the internet, so if you went on his show and you mentioned your website would crash because all the people were visiting your show. That's how much money you'd make from being on Art Bell. It was a big, big deal at the time. Okay. So David Oates is a frequent guest on the show, and David Oates used to, let's say, date these women fans of the show. He had these women followers who used to fascinate over this guy. And he would get in his van and drive around the country and go visit them and allegedly have sex with them in his van. Okay? That's freaking you get. But this is what the guy did. And a couple of these women, one was named Naomi and another one was named Melody. And they had both dated Oates and whatever. It's craziness. And there was another woman who used to call him Malaysia all the time, like a Ren Fair kind of, you know what I mean? Victorian, Malaysia. Oh, my God. So what happened was, according to these two witnesses, Oates started telling people that he was the Messiah or he was the Antichrist or whatever, and reverse speech was going to unlock the universe. And he had this messianic complex going on. And these women also claimed that he had threatened he was going to kill Art Bell. And they started sending messages and notes to Art Bell telling him, warning him about this. So, you know, you get these kind of messages from listeners and stuff like that, you know, and the crowd around his show, we're going to get into this later on. They were all just so crazy, bizarre people. It was just unbelievable. I had these people stalking me for years. I'll tell that story too as well. So he starts keeping an eye on Oates, right? And then there was the big falling out on the air where Oates would come up with these metaphors where he would play something in reverse and say, well, what they're saying is the sky is blue. And what that really means is that he's lying about this. You know, he would have these crazy, he couldn't even get it to go in reverse and have it make something that made sense. He would have to take it something that didn't make sense and then interpret it through metaphors. So Art Bell got fed up with him, and they had a falling out because there was all this other static going on in the background. And these women continually warned Bell about these threats, and Bell ultimately contacted the police. Around the same time, Oates had hired a private investigator company called Dig Dirt, digdirt.com, to dig up dirt on Art Bell that he could find. And all this is going on behind the scenes. Then the most bizarre thing happened. Because a lot of these people behind the scenes, they all knew each other, and they're all chatting on these message boards. And what was that thing called back in those days? I don't even remember. I'm going to mess it up. There was this different kind of chat format that we used back in those days. I forget what it's called. I might remember. But there was also a little side feud going on between Richard Hoagland and Major Ed Dames. And Major Ed Dames was a remote viewer guy that's had some kind of military background. He's predicted the end of the world like 10,000 times. There's going to be kill shots with the meteors hitting the earth and volcanic tubes up in Hawaii. This is ridiculous stuff. And everybody knows Richard Hoagland. I've been on Richard Hoagland's show. He's a nice guy. But they had some kind of dispute because Richard Hoagland claimed that he had a source in the NSA that was feeding him this inside information. And Dame says, well, who was ever saying that doesn't really have information, because if you have inside information, you don't give it away, especially if you're NSA. So Hoagland brings this guy on the show the next night, his source, a guy named Vance Davis. And if you Google Vance Davis, Ouija boards, NSA, his whole story comes up. Okay, you can find his, I think it's called like the Gulf Breeze 6 or the Clearwater 6 or something like that. But these NSA agents, they kind of went a little nutty. And they went AWOL for a while, and they had Ouija boards and stuff like that. And it was like a government project. I mean, they were playing with Ouija boards and Scientology and all kind of weird stuff. So get this. He comes on Art Bell, and this is back in 96. And he says, he's telling things he knows, but it's not enough. And Bell wants, tell us something really good. What kind of real good dirt do you got? And he goes, well, we're hearing that there's going to be an attack on the East Coast, on the Northeast, in the fall by Bin Laden. Oh, this is years before the World Trade Center attack. And this guy's talking about it. No one had been talking about this at all. And what happens the next day? All hell breaks loose. Art Bell has a guest on a show named Robert A.M. Stevens, who was some character who popped up on the internet, and he was a guest on Jeff Rentz and some other little shows. And the first thing he said on the first show he was ever on, he says, they introduced him, he says, well, I am a Navy SEAL. And then he goes on to talk about how he's an artist, and he is a contractor for NASA. He works for NASA. And then ultimately, he goes on when his resume would increase with each of the passing day. Then later on, he was a spy, and he was a fireman, and he was a cowboy. And what else? You know what I mean? Oh my God! What else could you be after that? Look at all the things little kids dream about being when they grow up. Really fascinating character this guy was. So he gets into a big fight with Hoagland on the air, and they kick him off the air. And there was a lot of buzz about that going on for a few days. And so Steven's not going away quiet. He teams up with Oates. When we think they were teamed up beforehand to this, but at that point he teams up with Oates, and he creates this message board and website pretty much on a daily basis to harass Art Bell. So let's fast forward. I'm in my condo on Staten Island. And I had this really beautiful I think back now, what a beautiful place that was, man. My dining, I had like a black marble dining table with these gorgeous chairs from Maurice Valenci, and this, marble side table. Oh my God, I had a pool table. With a second floor and a loft, I had a pool table up there. Oh God, what a life I had. And my phone system I had was called Wide Area Centrex. We had to dial 9 to get out, but my phones were connected to the mall and to my office. It was all on one big giant thing, so you could just pick up the phone and hit the number, hit 1, and I would go to Christie or whatever. I worked from home a lot. So we had decided to put a new bathroom in the downstairs bathroom. And I was going to put a new tub in, a new tile, and have it all done nice and pretty. And so I hired some guy, and the guy turned out to be a real jerk. And he made a mess out of the bathroom. So, and that was the only shower we had. Okay. It was the only full shower and full bath that we had, and they had to turn off the water. So I was cooped up in my place there. I couldn't shave, and I couldn't shower. So I was pretty much cooped up, and I would have to wait like 3 days. So I used to go and visit the Art Bell website. And I wasn't a big fan of Art Bell at the time, but I listened once in a while. And I was checking things on the internet, and I found the Art Bell website. And in there it says, Art Bell, for more information about the Art Bell David Oates feud, you can go to this link. And I thought, let me check out the link. And I click on the link, and it took us to a message board called Howl. And these were mostly fans of David Oates, but also some fans of Art Bell. And they were going back and forth, debating back and forth. And what the big debate going on back and forth that first day I came on there was that these two women who had been witnesses for Art Bell telling him, hey, David Oates is threatening your life, and Art Bell had gone to the FBI. Now these women were being threatened on that website. They were posting pictures of coffins and all this kind of stuff, and threatening their lives. So I had never participated in an internet message board before this. Okay, this was my first outing. I was never a debater in high school or college or anything like that. This is my first time in a public forum debate. And I created the name Observer because I was sitting there observing. And I created the name Observer, and I went on there, and I says, hey, if anybody's a witness and has given a witness statement to the FBI, and now they're being threatened on this website, you should immediately call up the FBI agent that interviewed and you took your statement and tell them you're being threatened. This is witness intimidation. Okay? It's serious business. I don't know how I said. By the way, too, I was so new with the internet back then. I didn't even know how to copy and paste or anything like that. There was no spell check. So every time I would reply back and forth to these people, I had to type the whole thing out. So my typing was all messed up. So as soon as I typed it in, who's this new guy, Observer, typing on this message board for him, the whole place went crazy. And right away they assumed that I had to be Art Bell. That Art Bell was posting under the name Observer. So all the regulars on there started debating with me back and forth. And I was answering every time they had an argument with me, I would argue right back. To the point where I was arguing with the whole freaking board. And I even showed my wife came up. And she says, what are you doing? I says, look at this screen. Because when you would comment on a thing, it would change color. And I says, look at this. These are all my responses. I'm arguing with all these people, and I'm destroying them. I'm making a mess out of these people. I'm beating them and everything they have to say. So, and now I'm cooped in this house for like 3 or 4 days because we got no water and we got no place to shower and I can't go out. I was on this thing 24 hours a day for the first 3 days. I had nothing to do. Just chat on this freaking message board with these crazy people. So this went on for about a year and a half, okay, with the daily arguing and fighting back and forth with these people. And more and more, these people stalking Art Bell's wife. And it came out that in this David Oates investigation of Art Bell, at the time, Art Bell's son, this is all in the newspapers, it's not a secret, but his son was kidnapped and physically abused. And kidnapped in chains by a teacher and given drugs and, chained and taken across, And somehow there was some kind of confusion or whatever in this investigation, and they made this allegation that Art Bell was abusing kids in their confusion. Okay? I became very close with Art Bell around this time and later on in the story, and we were talking to each other back and forth all day long, faxing back and forth and messages back and forth, and I've never seen any kind of indication the guy would do anything like that. So it was getting more and more intense back and forth, all this fighting and stuff. And Observer became a fixture on these boards and kind of like the guy who was kicking everybody's ass. So then what happens is people from Alt Art Bell on Usenet, you know what the chat room was called? It was called IRC. So you remember back in the old days, the IRC chat rooms, we'd all be chatting back and forth. So people from the Alt Art Bell and all the crazy people that were stalking Art Bell on Usenet found out about our little chat group, and they were saying, "Oh my God," because these guys were obsessed with Bell, and they were saying, "Oh my God, we can come here all day long. We can." And they used to make like these parody pictures and songs, and just obsessively, 24 hours a day. These people were just consumed with Art Bell's the show and his guests and the people. It was the most fascinating thing I've ever seen in my life. So they showed up, all as a group. They showed up all in one day, And they were like, "Oh, yeah, we're here to take over." Okay, all right. Well, I was running the thing at that point. I was in charge, I was kicking everybody's ass for coming along, So then this other group, an even more bizarre group called Spam House, showed up. And they all showed up like late to the party because this had been going on for months and months. And this group shows up, and these guys were totally obsessed with Bell as well. And these guys were real professional stalkers too. They even there was an ISP that was helping them out that they were all using. And the guy who owned the ISP was a real weirdo that was involved in all this stuff. Real creepy folks. And you would see them on Usenet, like they would stalk. Some woman had a son with cerebral palsy or something like that, and they would stalk this woman and call her retard. They would even go to like websites for like autism and cerebral palsy and like troll the people on there. Just bizarre trolls, weird people. And those are the ones who really became obsessed with me and started stalking me and actually showed up at my house one day. This is a sick bunch of folks, man. So now it really got intense. It was going back and forth. And there were a couple of folks that were just so obsessed with me, I just pretty much ignored them, because just let them ramble on. They were like children. Like the quality of the discussion and the debate deteriorated dramatically. But it went on back and forth, and several websites were created, and several message boards and chat rooms were created on this feud and on this topic. And Bell was aware of everything. He was aware of every single thing that was going on, and every word. He read everything on every freaking page. So I don't know how it came about, but I had sent an email to Keith Rowland, who was Art Bell's webmaster for artbell.com, and he somehow posted my email. And so now these people knew what my email address was. And it was, well, they really couldn't do anything with it, but now they had my email. It was harassing me through email. And I was kind of pissed at Keith about that. And me and Art got in contact with each other, and we started chatting via fax and telephone about what was going on in this feud. All right, and I was trying to help him out. I wasn't working as a private investigator at this time at all. I was working with the Beeper Company. I really didn't. This was a period of my life when I didn't have any PI work, because even during the Beeper Company time, I did do some information broker work. We set up a little company called Spiderweb Communications in order to buy and sell information through a friend of mine who used to do. See, I found this guy who used to do employment screening for me for the Beeper Company to do background checks on my employees, like credit reports and motor vehicle reports and that kind of stuff, and to verify their previous employers' information. So me and him worked out a little deal, and I was doing some information brokering with him because I had all these contacts still, but I didn't want to do all the work involved with buying and selling it. So I had a guy doing it for me. So I guess the next big thing that happened was, because it was all these big threats back and forth, and it really, really became intense. It became so intense, in fact, that this guy, Robert Stevens, because I totally exposed him. We ran his background. We checked with NASA to see if he worked there. I was calling Missoula, Montana. I was calling like the local library and the local police station to see what they know about this guy. I was checking this guy out from top to bottom, and nothing he said panned out. Everything he said was made up. But no matter how much you would blow him up, he'd stick with his story because he was crazy. Poor guy's dead now. Basically, his whole connection to NASA is that he donated some art. He did some art for them and donated it to them, and then made friends with someone over there, had a contact person over there, and then he claimed suddenly that he was an astronaut. And he also, too, he used to claim that he was dating one of the astronauts that died, Sally Ride, or the other one of those female astronauts that died in the crash. Poor guy was insane. And I was so cruel to this guy. I used to troll him all day long and all night long. And what I would do is, because back then you could just make up a fake name and post under a fake name, change your name if you wouldn't want to use your own name. So I would talk to someone, like let's say I would talk to one of his neighbors or someone from his church. Okay. Oh my God. I was a stalker. So let's say I would talk to someone like that and I'd find out a juicy tidbit of information about him. And so I would make believe I was a different person. I'd say, "Oh, Mr. Stevens, I support everything you're doing. I believe everything you're saying. What do you know about the Mormon religion? What can you tell me about this?" And then, and I'd have him going back and forth, and he's an authority, and he's going back, he's lecturing me on this stuff like that. And then I would zing him with it in the middle of the night. By the time it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and he was already drunk off his face, then I'd zing him, and he'd know it was me, and I'd been checking him out, and I'd been talking to his neighbors, Oh my God. And this is like a sport for me. It became, when I was talking to Art Bell's lawyers one day, I says, "Oh my God, I got addicted to this, to trolling these guys and to debating these characters, these nuts." So what happened was Art Bell made an announcement that, because Art Bell made an announcement because he would talk about this on the radio sometimes, about his feud with Oates and Stevens. And Art Bell made an announcement that he was going to make an announcement. It was a notice on his website. He was going to make an announcement on the air that night. And I took an educated guess that he had finally filed a lawsuit because I knew he was thinking of doing it. And I took an educated guess that he was going to file a lawsuit. So I posted as Observer and I says, "He's going to announce the lawsuit." Okay. But I was bluffing. I didn't know for sure, but I was bluffing. And I said, he's going to make the announcement tonight. You'll see. He's announcing the lawsuit. And that's what he did that night. When midnight, crack of dawn, I remember I refreshed the page, and there it was. He announced the lawsuit. He was suing David Oates and suing Robert A.M. Stevens. So now at that point, we knew it all along that you were involved with Oates. We knew it all along you were involved with Bell. Oh, you were in cahoots. You worked for Bell. We knew it. But no, it wasn't. It was just I was bluffing. Okay, I was bluffing, guys. Oh, my God. So, at that point, I was treated with much more respect on the board. And one of the women who had been dating Oates said, Ed, take it easy on him, because I could tell he's tired and he wants to settle. So I made an overture to him. I says, "Well, listen, man, you ready to negotiate a settlement?" And he says, yes, I must settle. Let's settle right now. So we contacted each other off the air. I had the cell phone business, the beeper business. So I had a cell phone that was a demo line. Okay, it was a free line that was provided to me by a company called HL Dallas. So I knew if I used one of those numbers, okay, on my demo line, that there's no way they could trace it back to me and find out who I was or where I lived and stuff. Okay, so I gave him that number. And the first night, I call him up and I'm talking, "I must settle. We have to settle right away. We must settle." But he says, "I've spent all this money on attorney fees. I have all these lawyer fees. I must receive compensation for the money I've laid out for this." And I said, "Okay, well, listen, with me, I'll talk to Bell and I'll try and work out a settlement there for you. How much do you owe your lawyer?" He says, $1,500. whatever it was, or whatever figure he gave me, 3,500, whatever ridiculous figure he gave me. I says, okay, I'll talk to Bill. I'll get back to you. So I talked to Bill, and I says, hey, listen, I got him. He's ready to settle. Okay? And says all he wants is a couple of bucks to pay the lawyer what he paid him. He gave me the figure, return it. And Bill goes, he didn't give his lawyer that much money. I says, how do you know? He says, well, what happened was when Oates faxed me his attorney information, by mistake, he also faxed over the retainer agreement with the amount that he paid the attorney. Right? So I said, that bastard, he lied to me. Here I am, I'm trying to help him. I'm trying to help everybody involved for free, by the way. Because it's kind of a hobby. I'm trying to help this guy for free. And he freaking lies to me. Makes me look stupid on top. So I get the Oates on the phone. I said, hey, man, whatever the figure was, 3,500, 5,000. You didn't give that much. I says, you only gave your lawyer this amount. And he goes, oh, no. And I says, no, look, I got it right in front of me. And I start reading it to him. I said, no, Art Bell was retained and the Art Bell lawsuit, David John Oates, the amount of blah, blah, blah. And he freaked out. Who are you? Who sent you here? Who do you work for? He's thinking right away, he thinks I'm CIA or FBI or some undercover agent. Because all these guys are crazy and paranoid on top of everything, man. I said, no, I'm not. I said, you were stupid and you faxed this over to Bell and he gave it to me. So you lied to me, man. So me and him have a little falling out. But then again, he comes back to me again later on and he wants to negotiate. And I'm negotiating back and forth with him and with Bell. And what happened was then is in one of our conversations, he tells me, he says, well, what my plan is I'm not going to respond to the lawsuit. It was a $60 million lawsuit. He says, well, I'll let him get the judgment and then I'll declare bankruptcy and that'll be it. So when I explained that to Bell and Bell's lawyers, they says, oh, he told you that? I says, yeah. I says, yeah, that's what he says. What are you going to do? He said, well, you can't do that. You can't contemplate bankruptcy and incur a debt while you're contemplating bankruptcy. That would be like if I'm going to file bankruptcy. Well, let me spend all my money. Let me run up all my credit cards, which everybody does. But if you have a witness that you told that you're going to do that to, that's a crime. You can't do that. You're unable to declare bankruptcy. So they says, will you put that in an affidavit? And I said, yes, I will. And I have the affidavit here. By the way, when we were just moving, this is why I remembered this whole story. I decided to do this with you. Is I have the entire affidavit, except for, I think, for the last page. I might have another version around here someplace. I'll find it. And we're going to scan it and put it up in the member section. We'll get that over to you. And you read the whole thing. So I did the affidavit, and I described everything he told me, my whole involvement with this whole thing, blah, 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 everything. And Art and Keith called me up, and they said, "Oh, we got your affidavit. This is great." They're laughing like little schoolgirls. Okay, they're laughing like little kids. And I said, "Well, listen, we know you got mad last time about your email address, so we're gonna put this up. It has your name on it." He said, "You don't mind, do you?" And I said, "No. I'm ready to do it." So then I knew that night, everyone in this crazy group was gonna see my name and find out my real name and where I lived and stuff like that. And I said, no, I'll do it. And I've been fighting with these people, and now we won, right? So let's just put it up. I want to take credit for winning, for beating their asses, right? And they did. And then, oh boy, and all that, the bleep hit the fan at that point, man. Because now all their stalking that they were doing, man, increased like tenfold. They ran a search on me. I know who did it too. There was a PI involved, and it was this guy from New Orleans. And he ran a search on me, found out my car and where I lived and stuff like that, and my social security number, my date of birth, and they posted it on the internet. But the thing is, everything that they looked up about me proved exactly what I said. I drove a convertible. I drove a Mustang convertible, and I lived on a golf course. Okay, that's what I've been saying all along. So it's not like they outed me and found out, I did all this stuff. And they still couldn't figure out what I did for a living. They were all confused. They thought I was doing all different kind of stuff. So they couldn't find my business and arrest me there. Oh, my God. It was so funny because I used to, when I would call, I forget who I was calling. But I used to have to use the payphone sometimes when I was making these calls. And one time I was down at the payphone, where it was in the entrance to the Staten Island Mall where we had the beeper store. And my employees would be walking by me as I'm screaming into the payphone, "He never worked for NASA. I called NASA." So they're like, "Oh my God, what's going on? What is this guy up to?" My boss is crazy. I'm there in a suit and tie screaming into a payphone with a giant handful of quarters. Screaming into the phone. All right, this is a good time to take a commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages. I'm telling you, Art Bell Feud story. And I seem to remember quite a bit of it. I have no notes on this at all. So we'll be right back after these messages with more of the Opperman Report and your host, Ed Opperman. And now a word from our sponsors. Archival Revival, the Christian Film Archive, is currently paying for vintage Christian films. They are dedicated to preserving and restoring classic Christian films and media. So if you have an original prints, negatives, or other film elements of classic Christian films, or you have audio recording masters for classic Christian record albums, they want to buy them from you. So email archival.revival@gmail.com and they're going to make you an offer. Archival Revival wants to preserve these classic Christian films so that they continue saving people for years. These films have brought people to salvation. They want to continue that. Their staff has decades of experience in handling and preserving of film elements, and they utilize the very best climate-controlled film storage facilities around the world. Contact them today at archival.revival@gmail.com. If there's someone you know has these prints, negatives, recording masters, or other materials from vintage Christian films, you can check out their blog at archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Now, just so you understand, Archival Revival wants to pay you for these films. So you can look in your church attic, in the church basement. If you have a friend who runs a Christian youth ministry or these youth vacation Bible study camps, they have these old films in those big metal containers, 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. Archival Revival wants to buy them from you. So this is a sponsor that actually wants to give you money. And all you have to do is contact them, tell them what you have. If you're in the UK or Ireland or Africa, these films are all over the world, and they're gathering dust, and they're going to deteriorate if they don't get into the hands of Archival Revival. So that's archival.revival@gmail.com, or the blog spot is archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Don't forget, this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. Phoebe Sod is an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. The Cocoa Exchange is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries, and they make the finest silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you go to pscoco.com, you click on the Shop Now button. You can see all their beautiful chocolates. You can order it right now tonight. It could be in your mailbox in a couple of days. Or if you want to get into the chocolate business, you want to be a chocolatier just like Phoebe Sod, you can click the Contact Us button, and you can learn how to get your own website, go into the cocoa chocolate business, and sell chocolate and make a little bit of money there. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But you also do all the kind of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites. And we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, even gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication or involved in a extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Adoption investigations. If you want to locate your birth parents or your birth child you gave away for adoption, we can do adoption investigations for you. Asset searches for you. Locate bank accounts, hidden assets, hidden properties, hidden income, all different kinds of services in the asset search investigation. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we can do an email trace investigation for you. And all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator, Ed Opperman. And as we left our story, our hero was settling the Art Bell David Oates $60 million lawsuit. So how that all wound up was they both agreed to go on the air and apologize to each other. And then Art Bell agreed to drop his lawsuit. Oates dropped his lawsuit because he filed some crazy countersuit. And they went each other's separate ways. And pretty much Oates dropped out of the scene. He didn't really come on these websites anymore complaining about Bell. He didn't talk about it. But he did show up occasionally. And by the way, more pissed off at me than ever. Here I am, begging me to settle for him. I got him out of it. But now he hated me even more than ever before. And then Stevens was such a flake, and he had no money. He was threatening to sue everybody if ever suing him. He didn't even respond to his lawsuit. So that pretty much drifted away as well. So I was on a roll here. I figured I'd solve this. So there was still a lawsuit between Art Bell and Ted Gunderson. So I said, you know what? I did so good with this. Let me call Ted Gunderson, okay? Because I had known Ted for years, and I was mostly trying to sell him on my services and trying to get him to use my information broker business, to buy plate numbers from me, cell phone breaks and locates and stuff like that every PI uses. Now they have these database services that are huge, but you had guys like me who had connections, with the phone company and the DMV, and you'd call me up or you'd send me a fax, and I'd call up my guy, and we'd shift the money around. So I had known Ted for years and years, and I called him up. He remembered me. It's funny too. Nothing with Ted was he had this idea in his head. Somehow, I don't know what it was. We had some conversation one day where he told me that he wanted me to duplicate audio tapes or videotapes for him, so he could sell. He wanted to send me a bunch of tapes. I would go to the store, buy blank tapes, duplicate them, send them back to him, and then we would sell them. I had no experience in doing this. I knew it could be done. I knew I could buy the VCR with it, but the duplicating thing, I knew it could be done. And I knew, I could do it if I wanted to. But I never promised I was going to do this or whatever. I don't know how he got this idea. Maybe he had me confused with somebody else, or we discussed maybe when I used to do my audio stuff with the Pete's Connection trial. I don't know what it was. And so every time I would talk to him, he would always say, well, what about that thing we were supposed to do with the videotapes? You never got back. I said, Ted, I'll do it with you. I know I'm not, that's not what I do. But I'll do it. Let's go do it, And then, I'd never hear from him again. And then I'd call him back for something else. And, well, whatever happened to that thing? And I'd say, what, man? That's not my thing. That's your thing. I'll do it if you want. So anyway, I call him up. That's the first thing out of his mouth. Well, whatever happened to that thing? And it was stuck in his head that I was his videotape guy. So I said to him, listen, man, I'm involved in this whole Art Bell lawsuit. And he goes, oh, yeah, listen, I can't talk about that. I'm in litigation. I don't want to talk about that. He says, what's your involvement? And I says, well, I helped negotiate the other portion of it. And I can work this out. I says, you and Art Bell would like each other if you ever talk to each other off the air, because you're both right-wing, you're both nuts. I said, I didn't say that, but I said, you guys would like each other. You can work this out. I'll help you. Do some apologies. And he goes, no, I don't have to worry about that because, my insurance company's handling it, that my errors and omissions insurance is covering that for me. So I knew at the time from being a PI, I wasn't a PI at that time, but from previously being a PI and, being around PIs and PI work, that I knew that you have to have errors and omissions insurance as a private investigator. So if you make a mistake or you leave something out of your report and the client is damaged and they sue you for that, let's say I say someone has a criminal record and they really don't by mistake. Or I don't say they have a criminal record and they do because I omitted it. And then the guy goes out and does something crazy on the job. They come after me. So you got this insurance. It's very cheap. And he says, well, and so at the time, I just assumed, okay, yeah, that's how that works. I didn't know anything about being on the radio or having a radio show like that. I know today that's BS. That my errors and omissions insurance that I have right now today doesn't cover me for anything I say on the radio. So he had some other insurance company handling this for him. Okay? Think of that. I don't know what it was, but I think he was still working for the FBI. Because I had clients later on tell me that they ran into him at the FBI office. So I think the whole Ted Gunnison thing, he was always working for the FBI. But whatever. That's a side. We may all do a whole show about that one day, but whatever. So, he didn't want me to help him. And then when later on we talked after he lost the suit and his insurance company settled, then he said to me, he says, you know what, I should have fought that suit because he thought he didn't do anything wrong is what he felt. Even though I'm pretty sure he was mixed up with that whole, he got confused by that crazy report by that Dig Dirt company, which went out of business too, by the way. And not because of this, but just being, I guess, doing bad work. Okay. I guess around this time, I guess this is what you would call, it's a small world segment. One of these women who was dating Oates and feeding information to Bell, she also had gone on the Oprah Winfrey show claiming that her father molested her. And that turned out to be all wrong. And then she apologized to her father, back and forth. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, whatever. She had problems. These were very fragile, delicate women that had rough lives and had issues. And that's what really used to piss me off about the way Oates and Stevens were treating them. Because these are people that obviously had problems. These were, people that had been through the mill. So one day I'm chatting with this woman on IRC, in one of our many chat rooms we had, and she says, oh, I'm dating a man who's from Staten Island. Maybe you know him because he lives in Vegas now. I pretty much knew everybody who lived in Staten Island moved to Vegas, okay, because it's a small crowd. But it turns out it was a pretty good friend of mine named Dave, who we were actually going to go into business together at one point when we were moving out to Vegas. He had moved out to Vegas a few years before me. So me and my wife invited her and Dave over to our house. And, we had a nice dinner with them. We had a nice time. And we had a good evening. And then, Dave and her had a falling out. Now, what happened was, okay, this won't be in chronological order, but I'll tell you the story about Dave and her. She went to live with Dave. And Dave was a straight guy. He was married to the same woman for like 50 years. He had a daughter that was a prosecutor. The guy did business with Trump. The guy did business with Cashman. I forget the other family. The big people here in Vegas. The guy was a real serious businessman, legit guy, good guy. And she went to live with him and had a breakdown. I had to go to one time. Me and Dave were going to a convention together here, and the ambulance was coming to pick her up because whatever. I didn't know if it was a suicide attempt or what. She claimed it was some stomach cramps or whatever it was, but he had given her a eviction notice, and then she wound up in the emergency room, and she was hysterical. I went down to the emergency room, trying to calm her down. Let me tell you something. My conscience is so clear in this whole case. I did nothing wrong, nothing bad to anybody, never hurt anybody. I tried to help everybody involved, and things got pretty nasty, all around, really, and unappreciated all around, I would say. So Dave kicks her out of his house, and she starts stalking him. And wasn't just stalking him, but was also trying to drag me into it. Okay? Like, I was trying to keep out of it. But in the chat rooms and the message boards, she had this other friend who was this crazy guy who actually later on I found out that they investigated him for the anthrax case. Okay? Because he worked at the post office. That's a whole nother story, because I contacted people that worked in the same post office with him. He says, yeah, the FBI was down there asking questions about this guy. This guy's a nut. He married some woman on death row, which is a real nut as well. So these two were going back and forth saying, she's saying, Dave tried to kill me. He tried to tamper with my brakes. Oh, and he's saying, well, you better go to the police and take pictures of the brakes. And all this kind of stuff right in front of me to piss me off and drag me into this, when there's no way Dave did any of that kind of stuff. In fact, he went to court and he had a restraining order against her because she was off her meds. That's what happened in real life. So I got so pissed off, you know. I says, that's it. I'm not dealing with these people ever again. Okay? And at one stage in all this, because this is way back in the beginning, this is before Google. Okay? I'm talking about Yahoo and stuff like that you'd use. I don't know, maybe Google was just starting out. But I did a search on my own name, and I typed in Ed Opperman, Observer. And you know what came up? A picture of my office in my apartment, in my home, in my ex-wife's house. That I had we took to one of the bedrooms. I made an office in there with my computers where I did all my, and someone had been in my house and took a picture of my office and called it Observer. And I think it was that woman who was in my house. Okay, betraying me like that. Then what happened too is this other character was stalking the hell out of me. And he actually came to my house. He lived all the way up in Northern California. And he drove like 9 hours in this beat up like landscaping type truck. And I'm home, and my daughter was a little baby, so I was babysitting my daughter. And as the doorbell rings, I answer the door, and there's some guy there, and he says, "Oh, I'm here to meet the real estate agent." I said, "Well, there's no real estate agent here. We're not for sale or anything like that." And he goes, "Oh my goodness, can I use your phone?" No. And he says, "Oh, can I come in and use your phone?" I knew something was goofy right away. And I see this truck, this beat up truck. Anyway, I found out later on that was this freaking nut that was stalking me from this board. He had my address. He came all the way just to look at me and see what I looked like. And then drove all the way back. How sick is that? So this was at a period of time where there were no email tracing. There was no way to trace someone's email, to get a name and address from someone's email. And so I started calling around to OPI friends of mine and stuff like that. And says, "Well, how do you do an email break? How do you get a name and identify somebody from an email?" And they would all say, "Well, Ed, there's no way to do it. There's no way to do it. You can do this. You can get the IP address and trace it back to the ISP and then get a subpoena. But otherwise, there's really no way to do it. Find out what the guy's name is or where he's located." And it was this that motivated me, this incident, because I wanted to identify this guy. So I sat down. I thought of a little trap that I could create where I could get them to reveal who they were. Right? That's how I came up with the name Email Revealer for my website, because this is how I learned how to trace emails. And I said, well, no one else can do it, because I talked to the top guys in the field. I was talking to the top private investigators at the time. It was like around 2000. Talked to the top guys who were doing this. And so I said, okay, and I learned how to trace emails, and I started selling that service, tracing emails, locating and identifying people from an email address. So something good came out of all this. And I also, then I learned how to trace them back to online dating websites and catch people cheating online. Then I learned how to monitor an email account, see if anybody's accessing your email account and reading your emails, hacking your account. So that's how I became like this email expert guy, because I needed this service for my own personal safety, my own personal well-being, and I learned how to do it. Let's see. I'm not sure if I'm leaving anything out of this story. That might be the whole thing. The whole thing. The fight with the Stevens. And then later on, Stevens died. I guess we could fit that in. But I guess that's the whole story, that these guys were stalking Bell. Bell sued them. I negotiated a settlement because they confessed to me that they were going to do this bankruptcy fraud. I tried to help out with the Gunderson. Gunderson kind of revealed that he was on some other kind of insurance. It wasn't PI insurance. I don't know what other kind of insurance he had. He called it errors and omissions. If it was some kind of errors and omissions involved with the FBI, that would make sense, because he was working a case undercover, instigating things. COINTELPRO, because he was COINTELPRO for real. That's what he did for the FBI in LA. They threw Black Panthers in prison. That's what his job was. That's where COINTELPRO originated and was operating. And I guess that's about it. And that's how I had the falling out with the people, and I kind of left them alone and left them behind because they were stalking my friend Dave. And you know what? We were all good friends, too. It was kind of a shame because we were really close. We were in battle together, But when they started stalking Dave, because he was an old guy and he was a widow. He was just a widow. As a matter of fact, too, I can't go into this detail, but there was one night where I had to go get Dave out of trouble because he was a wreck that night. Because he was lonely and his wife left. His wife died and he was here in Vegas all by himself. Anyway, so I guess that's the whole story for you, the whole Art Bell feud and my involvement with it. Now, that's my recollection as of today, and I'll attach to. I'll put the affidavit up in the member section as soon as I get a chance. That's my recollection as of today. If anybody else is involved and you want to share your recollection, if you have a different memory of this situation, my dates are wrong, some of the names are wrong, you can contact me and I'll add it to the show and I'll make a correction. But that's how I remember things. Okay, so before anybody listens to this and starts to rent and assume me or whatever you think you're going to do, okay? I know a little something about defamation lawsuits, okay? Like I said, I negotiated a $60 million one. I also sued someone for defamation. Also, as a private investigator, I've worked on dozens and dozens of these cases, capturing the evidence and e-discovery and presenting exhibits in defamation cases. So, okay, all this craziness about threatening to sue people, trust me, I've been and done that. Anyway, so if you like the show, this is our member section. You're already in the member section. This will never play live. Sponsors, we're looking for sponsors. And donations, okay? We need your donations all the time. Let me tell you. You can send a donation to oppermanreport@gmail.com, especially this month. Things are really, really tight. I was supposed to have a big job. It fell through after I already did a bunch of work on it. Then they tell me they're not going to hire me. So what are you going to do? That's why I'm trying to put up some extra content here in the member section. oppermanreport@gmail.com if you want to be a sponsor. If you want to send a donation, I'm your guy. Okay? And that's the inside story of the Art Bell, David Oates, Robert Stevens, Navy SEAL. Oh, well, you know what? There's a little bit more. Maybe I'll add to this as time goes on because there's some other people. Because a lot of people, big names that are in radio today, were behind the scenes in all this, causing skullduggery and kind of agitating the situation too. And I used to tell Bell, man, I says, you know what, man, these guys should work on their own show. Rather than be here stalking you. How does that work? And a lot of guys, too, are out there trying to defame me and to harass me and annoy me. Work on your own show. Build up your own audience. Don't be worried about what I got. Build up your own. It's easy to get on stations. It's easy to get on iHeart and iTunes. You do a little work, you do it.